Avital Shreiber, who I found when I must have been, I don't know, a month into my parenting journey. I was Googling things like, does my baby love me? Like, what is attachment theory? And how do I speak respectfully to a newborn? Like, I had the idea of like raising a child in a different way, and I didn't know what that really meant on a practical level until I found Avital's YouTube channel. It's called the Parenting Junkie, and it's video after video of a new way of seeing children and interacting with children. I mean, it was new for me. I'll say, I see Avital nodding. Avital is also the founder of Present Play, a community that I'm a proud member of. It's full of parents from around the world creating Family Bliss. Her motto is to love parenting and to parent from love. You can check her out on her podcast as well, the Parenting Junkie Show. There's more, but I want to launch right in and perhaps, give you the mic and let us know, how did you come to this performance coach for parents journey? Like, how did you even know that was a thing, or was it a thing?
Daniela, hi. First of all, thank you so much. What a warm introduction. It gave me all the feels, and it's so wonderful to see your beautiful face and be with you almost in the same room. How did I come to it? It was very much born of necessity, almost desperation, you might say. Because I was in this really kind of paradoxical place where in my mind I had decided that I did not want to miss out on the human experience of being a parent. But in my heart, I was I was harboring a lot of fear, a lot of old childhood pain, a lot of concern about how I would perform in this role. And, what the stakes are very, very high in parenting. It's a whole other human's life, not to mention your own life. And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to kind of attack this like a project, right? Like a project. I'm going to educate myself. And I started reading Chaim Ginott and Janet Lansbury and Dr. Shefali Tsabari and Dr. Laura Markham and Simplicity Parenting and all these different books. And one kind of led to the other. And that's why I called my channel The Parenting Junkie, because I was just a junkie for this learning that was really inspiring and exciting, and reframed up this whole adventure of parenting in a way that was a lot more aligned with kind of who I wanted to be and what I wanted my life to be like. And I had no idea at the time that I could make a career out of that or that I could become a coach. I was just really very enthusiastic and annoying to anyone who wanted to hang out with me, because I was like, have you read this book? Have you heard of this concept? Do you know what baby-led weaning is? So I was like, okay, rather than, repel all of my friends, I'll just share my stuff on YouTube, and people who are actually interested in it will find it there. I felt like this is information that every parent or many parents would want, but not everyone's going to wade through these books and find them as geeking out on them as I am. And that's exactly what it was. So it wasn't my own ideas at the time. It was really me just summarizing things and giving my own spin, like what I agreed with, what I disagreed with. And I think I'd be remiss not to mention that what I did find, and I continue to find, is a discrepancy between the ideal or the utopian ideas that I read in the books and what I am able to implement in practice. And I did want to create a space that kind of allows for both of those things to be true at once. That yes, we want to show up incredibly well as parents, but also no, we're not always going to be able to do that. And maybe sometimes it's going to be our deepest source of shame and vulnerability that we can't or we don't. And I that was a voice I wasn't quite hearing in the space, the reality of it. And I'm a big lover of reality. I believe talk about reality. And so, so that was kind of, I guess, my angle that I wanted to bring to it.
I really appreciate that, because as you said, like, we come to parenting with our own traumas. big and small, whatever. Some are big and dramatic and some are absolutely not, but we come to parenting with our own shit, really. And if we don't acknowledge that, and we're just reading these books and just being perfectionistic, I think we can actually do, it could be a much more uncomfortable situation and experience than it needs to be. So your voice has been so helpful. And I think that also, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that while we're parenting, and you happen to be parenting 5 children, bless them all. I just didn't want to miss that point. So cute. And I kind of am like, should I be doing that? Because that looks like fun. Personal choice. Yeah, it seems like you're reparenting yourself actually in the process.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, without a doubt. As my 10-year-old will often remind me.
He reminds you like out loud?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'll be like, you have work to do in this area, for sure. Yeah. No.
My therapist says that like when we have, children who like talk back like that, talk back, quote unquote, they're intact, like this is what we want from children, for them to be able to say like, oh no, that's your stuff. And I'm not taking that on. That's on you. So as you know, this podcast is actually for the uninitiated, right? So the guys and gals who might be interested in parenting, but as you said, are on the fence, as we should be. It's a big responsibility.
Definitely.
So there's some questions. There's some questions I got over here for you. So you're mother of 5. How do you manage time for yourself? Are you strictly living and dying by iCal, or do you intuitively wing it? Let us know.
Yeah, no, I'm more of a planner in general. What I like is I like to have a plan, and then I'm okay breaking the plan. But I like to have the rules and the clarity on what our plan is. I do find that proactive parenting works much better than reactive parenting, for me at least. Yeah. So and not in every area of your life and not all the time, and you've got to be flexible 100%. You've got to roll with the punches. But yeah, iCal is definitely a big part of my life.
I came to parenting really wanting to do it right, which is like, oh my God, setting myself up for failure just like from the start. Because like, what is right? Like, you can't like ace this thing.
Not a test.
And one of the things I've learned from you is that actually, what if doing a good job is just having a good time doing it? I'd love to hear more about that concept that like, there are definitely no-nos, right? There are no-nos, but absolutely. In general, what do you mean by, loving parenting and parenting from love is the goal actually? What does that mean to you?
So I think there are several concepts intertwined here, so I'll try and tease it apart. One of the things you just said was that, have a good time doing it. And I think that doesn't mean have a good time like we have a good time when we're, binging on potato chips and watching Netflix after Netflix. That might feel good on a superficial level, or we might get the dopamine hit there. But I think we all have a little bit of a voice inside that doesn't feel great doing that endlessly, right? So I think in parenting too, or in our life in general, I believe that we have a conscious and we have an inner guide. It often expresses itself through our emotions. Like we feel satisfied, we feel a sense of meaning, we feel all those spiritual feelings like awe or gratitude or connection when we are living well, right? When we're living in alliance with our values and our belief systems on a deeper level. And I think when we are parenting well, that's what we'll feel. We'll feel a sense of, we'll feel humbled. We'll feel a sense of reverence. It really does become, the project of your lifetime to nurture this meaningful relationship. It does become the source of meaning in your life in many ways. Showing up for this individual, this vulnerable, needy, small, young growing individual, and being for them. I would put it like this: first, doing no harm, kind of like the physician's oath, right? Showing up and trying to do no harm. That's in and of itself a big enough goal, a goal of great magnitude, and really unattainable for lots of us. Most of us, myself for sure, will do some harm. But aiming, striving, having that North Star of first doing no harm. I think when we're in that role, kind of like a doctor or like anyone doing work that's meaningful to them, you feel good about yourself. You don't feel like you're a waste of space or wasting time or all the things that we don't value in ourselves. We don't feel like, oh, I'm just being lazy or I'm being selfish. We feel proud of ourselves when we're able to show up for someone in that way. And so I think loving parenting is about parenting in a way that makes you feel proud of how you showed up, or at least doesn't make you feel ashamed of it.
Part of the reason why I wanted to gather my favorite women around this topic is because I imagine we would have been hanging out in the village, me and you, and I would have heard that. And that Laura right over here, she just would have heard the two of us talking, one with a baby on the tit, maybe not. Yeah. Mine would have a bottle. But, there would be, we'd have more access than we do right now, even with the internet, information filled as it is. I don't know that we have the access to this sort of mentorship, this sort of sisterhood, really. Like, you're one of 5 also?
I'm the youngest of 6.
Oh my God. And how many nieces and nephews do you have?
I think it's 30.
Oh my God, that's so fun. My nephew was like the best thing that ever happened to my life. Like, my son, oh my gosh, having my son, it felt like the Matrix had opened up. Did you feel that way? Like, yeah. I got to the hospital and it felt like I was on some sort of spaceship. Also, because like there were all these like beep, 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 and the wire, like it was very spaceshipy. But also, then there were 2 people in the room, and then there were 3, like a magic trick. And then we entered into a whole new earth.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing.
But I felt similarly with my nephew on like a very on a smaller level, like all of a sudden there was like a crack in reality, like, oh, there he is, and he looks like my brother, but better.
It is miraculous. It's a cliche to say nothing prepares you for how you'll feel as a parent, but I think it's a cliche for a good reason, right? It's really something that almost universally, I think people feel this profound, kind of shift of the earth when you become a parent. I felt, I articulated it as feeling like someone had kind of taken my heart out of my body and put it in this little vulnerable thing right there, and suddenly I had never been so deeply connected to another human being, and there he was. It was just
10 years later, he's just calling you out in your own programming because he's got your heart in his hand. Yeah, no pressure. I actually, it was an even weirder feeling actually the second time around. I'm like, but I only had the one heart. How did it multiply? It's totally bizarre. In the makeup chair just now, our amazing makeup artist asked me like what my favorite part about being a mother is, and I said I think it's like kind of post-verbal, it's like it's just like that. It must be the oxytocin and the dopamine, and it's like a real feeling state. It feels miraculous. It's a total high. It's a total high where you're like, even when I've been in your courses while you were pregnant, and man, you do pregnancy really good. You do. But for me, I felt like, oh my gosh, there's this like, I'm like growing eyeballs and fingers, and a soul is being like hovering around me, in me. And also I'm very nauseous. Yeah. Like on a logistical, everyday, physical, manifest level, this is disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
what are
absolutely.
some things that you didn't expect going into parenting that you would like to share with our producer, Laura, over here, who's my muse?
I'll take any tips I can get.
Oh, there she is on the mic.
Yeah, I would love to know, just, coming from a place of, I'm an only child, I have no nieces and nephews, and I'm not around kids, so my experience is very limited. So when I see kids hysterically crying or throwing an insane fit or a crazy tantrum, how can you explain like the weight of both of like the oxytocin and the dopamine and the feels and the tantrums and the crying and what looks like to me, being perfectly frank, what would make me want to leave you in the cart at a food store and walk out. So how do you balance both of those feelings?
Thanks, Laura.
That's a great question. What comes up for me is kind of a certain, I have a little bit of a tough love edge to me. I think
this is why we like her, just for the record.
What comes up for me when you ask me, and I'll just rephrase the question and tell me if I'm getting this right, is when I don't have kids, so if I see someone tugging along a toddler in the cereal aisle who's throwing things and screaming, that looks like an abusive, toxic relationship. Why would I opt into that? Why would I opt into being treated like that or lugging around this lump of human that isn't polite, has a runny nose, can't read and write, can't make money, costs a lot? Okay, so they'll give me cute hugs once in a while, but the rest of the time I have the responsibility of this, this person walking around in society, and why would I ever opt into that? Tear into my body, tear into my bank account, tear into my sex life. Like, no, thank you. So it's funny. I think I see parenting a little bit like this. I see it a little bit like a personal Mount Everest, in the sense that you don't have to do it, right? We live in a time, especially where it's a choice, and not everyone needs to climb Mount Everest, as it were. But if you did choose to embark on it, you wouldn't be embarking on the climb of Mount Everest because it was easy, or because it was a stroll in the park, or because there was no challenge to it. You would be doing it because of the challenge. That's what makes it Everest. The fact that you have to show up for someone who has no prefrontal cortex development, has no understanding of the world, hasn't developed a belief system, hasn't learned cause and effect in the most basic way, doesn't have emotional regulation, and needs a lot of care, a lot of responsibility from you, will demand a lot from you, will demand you to grow some really big muscles, right? To get strong, to be able to pick up a heavy burden of weight and carry it over the course of a long time. And the thing about that is that even though it's heavy, or maybe because it's heavy, it brings with it deep meaning and satisfaction. So the person who climbs Everest is entitled to a sense of pride and satisfaction that the person who, sat and watched them or climbed up a little hill may not ever experience. You can find that kind of meaning elsewhere. I'm sure I haven't, but I think people do.
Certainly.
But it's hard to find that kind of project. I would go so far as to say it's impossible to find that depth of meaning without the weight of the burden that goes along with it. I think that's kind of where it comes from, in a way.
The poetry that spills out of this woman. It's like the poetry. I was so inspired by you, and of course by, you mentioned Janet Lansbury and Magda Gerber, who was her mentor. And so I started teaching at a place called Union Square Play, but it's not that I teach the children. The children know exactly how to play, which, as Maria Montessori would say, is the work of the child. They know exactly how to play. All I do is press the pause button on the parents, like, hey guys, I've set out these materials. Watch. Watch. You don't interact. You don't have to correct. You don't have to save them from themselves. Poetry.
Yeah.
Like if we can step back for a second and, oh my gosh, watch human life unfold right before your eyes. It's really magnificent. Even if it's not your own child, actually, it turns out sometimes even more. I don't have to change the diaper. I don't have to deal with their nap, but it really is a poetic experience. I'm reminded of that because you've been in this experience for 10 years and the poetry really flows out of you when we're talking about it,
Yeah, and when we're talking about it, but not necessarily if you were witnessing me actually parenting. Because
thank you.
Yeah, like I just want to keep it real, because I think there's we have to stay inspired. You have to, if you're climbing Mount Everest, you need that guidance, you need that motivation. You can't always be in pain and complaining and frustrated, or you won't be able to keep going. So I absolutely believe in staying inspired. But there is very real frustration and difficulty along the way. And just you saying like, oh, sometimes it's even easier to watch other people's kids. Absolutely. Like I find it so much easier to be patient with my nieces and nephews because I can just be the fun aunt, Yeah. I don't have to then be responsible for their discipline and their, how they show up and being respectful and doing their homework and blah, 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 blah. So it's very liberating to be in that position. And I think it's important to know that we may talk lofty, but ultimately, if you see me with my kids, you're going to see just really uninspiring interactions as well. Really just
90% of the time.
Just yuck. Yeah, maybe. I hope not.
No, I don't know about 90%. Okay.
No, but a lot every day. Let's put it that way. Definitely every day. Yeah.
Well, you reminded me recently I took your course Alchemize. Yes.
Alchemize, correct. Yeah.
Recently I took your course Alchemize, and you reminded me of the Good Enough Mother.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first, call we were on was about the Good Enough Mother. It's like, we can't be perfect. In fact, perfect is not what we're going for. And sure, if you're watching me parent, you'll be like, ugh, like she was some sort of mommy blogger on Instagram yesterday, and like she's yelling at her kids now for like what? Nothing. If we're setting the bar so high that we can't function, it's not helping anyone. Which leads me to like, you also talk a lot about this pandemic of isolation in parenthood and the idea that another person would judge you because they're not in your life enough to know the full experience, that we're not hanging out, me, you, and Laura, and breastfeeding and bottle feeding and giving us a hand. Like, because we're so lonely, we're also quite judgmental of each other. You have been talking about this pandemic of isolation.
Oh, I think it's an absolutely terrible thing that's happened to humanity. I really do. I think it's made parenting an unnatural phenomenon. It's not the way we were, evolved for. It's not what we're designed for. And I think it's brought out the worst in us, both towards our children and towards each other. Yeah. I think I know from my own personal experience, I am a much better parent when I'm hanging out in my group, with other friends, with other kids around. There's inhibiting forces, there are balancing forces, there is wisdom that is pooled, there is labor that is shared, and that those valves have to be opened in order for the system to ventilate. Just one mom or a mom and a dad or whatever it is, alone in the house with the kids, it really is a disaster, and the pressure builds and it must go somewhere, and it typically tends to go on exploding at the kids or on binge eating or on, shopping till you're numb or whatever, pick your poison, right? You have to escape that pressure cooker, and the lid blows eventually. But when you're with others, it doesn't, right? Because there's always these natural lulls and breaks and humor and empathy and all these medicines that we need. And we're not getting them. And so it's no wonder we're all, depressed at home with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that was way before any lockdowns, hey? That was...
I'm curious also for you, Avital, because you just moved country again. How do you, navigate creating community and friendship these days?
I mean, rather proactively, I'd say, first of all. And I think one of the things you have to do, and this is part of that Everest climbing, because parenting is nothing if not growing up, right? You have to be a real grown up, which is, it's hard to adult, right? It's hard to grow up. But I think one of the parts of growing up is to show up to the world the way that you want the world to show up for you. And so one of the things that I find is necessary for me to do is, if I'm lonely and I want connection and I want people to open their homes to me and to accept me with my 5 children and to help me. And
they're really cute, for the record. They're really cute.
Depends on the time of day. Anyway, yeah, if I want all of that from people, then I'm going to need to cough up, right? I'm going to need to provide that for others. Yeah. So I need to start opening my home and making the invitations and writing the messages and being there for people, and talking back to that perfectionistic point. I think a lot of us are very preoccupied. Oh, how does my home look? And is the meal okay? And what if my kid has a tantrum? What if they poop on the floor just as the guests come in? And all of those fears stop us from ultimately the human connection that we really are seeking. And I think that if it's kind of like, you've got to give what you want to get. So if you want people to offer to help with carpool or to, then we've got to proactively, reach out to people and make that a possibility. I often have to say very explicitly, like, you can knock on our door even if we don't have a play date planned well in advance, or please see me as someone who you can lean on in a time of stress. Like, listen, I make dinner every night anyway. It really doesn't make a difference if you drop by with your 3 kids as well. Like, just come. I can always throw another pot of pasta in, So I think you have to explicitly say, like, I'm lonely. I would love to hang out. And I don't care if it's just meeting in the playground or you coming over, or like, yes, there will be tantrums and yes, it will be messy, but let's go for it, because everyone stands to benefit. And I think the truth is that everyone's starving for that, but many of us have so much social hang-ups and awkwardness and fears and anxieties, really, that ultimately will settle for isolation and for loneliness and for this kind of shame of just locking ourselves away and not, I'm not fit for friendship because I have a little kid, rather than the craziness. I just wanted to say one story. I learned this from my very close friend, Moran, who years ago, we became friends, and she invited me over for a homeschool meetup, whatever. I came over, and I think my 2-year-old peed on her rug. My 2-year-old actually peed on her rug. Like, this is the first time I'm meeting this woman. She had a gorgeous house.
Ness has peed on so many rugs. Ness has peed on my friend Chrissy's couch, I think 3 times. And then Paz, the little one, came over to the new house and then peed on the kitchen floor. I mean, really, these kids.
It's not like an old friend, it's like brand new. First time I'm there, and I'm mortified. I'm just like, I'm so sorry. And she just brushed. She was just so amazing. She was just like, they're she's like, it's a kid. What are you even apologizing for? Like, hey, grab a rag, clean it up, no biggie. Like, and I love that she let me clean it up as well. She wasn't like, oh, I'll do it, right? She was just like, we're all in the muck together. Come on, like, let's. And it created this sense of ease in me that she wasn't making a huge deal out of this, that it was, she understood what kids are like. And, and the other thing is that when you ask for people for help, when you ask for help, people generally, I think, for the most part, depending on how you ask and how often, but for the most part, I think people feel really honored. I think people feel really kind of chosen and special, and like, wow, you opened up to me that you needed help, or that you were lonely. And I think that's missing in our culture, like telling people, like, we've just, you know, whenever I've moved country, I've done it twice now with my kids and once as a child, and I'll say to people, you know, we've just moved, my kids don't speak the language, we're looking for friends, you know, can we hang out sometime, will you come over?
Lucky
you know,
them.
Proactively is my main answer, is like, I don't think you can take no for an answer, and I don't think you should. I think it's a matter of supreme mental health. I think it's as important, if not more important, than working out, eating healthy, your sleep, all of that stuff, right? It has a absolutely undoubted proven effect on the quality and length of your life, you know, your connections to a sense of a tribe, and that is not something to put off till later, not something to take lightly, you know, not something to ignore. If you're feeling a little bit depressed or a little bit down or a little bit in you know, in the blue, that the medicinal immediate effect of social connection and belonging is more powerful than anything else. And I think it's just so overlooked.
Yeah.
Underrated.
I was telling the girls in the green room about how in those lonelier days in the beginning with Ness, my son, I would have you playing in the background. I don't think I ever even told you this. I mean, you know, like your YouTube sort of just be in the background, and then your podcast later on. And it was a feeling of like, oh, here's this like-minded mother. She's here. You know, I think there is such, it's great, you know, that the internet exists, that this podcast exists. I think it's really, it's a stepping stone. There's nothing like in-person, real life connection, but there certainly are like-minded people out there. And I see that in Present Play, in your membership, where there are these men and women, parents from all over the world. How many countries are represented?
More than 73.
How cool is that? How cool.
It's mind-blowing, actually. It's unbelievable. I agree with you 100%. It's amazing.
And we don't agree on everything at all. But on consciously creating a life for yourself and your children, consciously creating family bliss, as you call it. I mean, that's really exciting. And it is available, if not in person, it certainly is available over the interwebs.
Yeah, no, I
and
agree.
So, and that can relieve some pressure when it comes to like real life interactions that, you know, if I have friends that are yelling at their kids, or maybe they're like a little grabby, and do I like it? Is it comfortable for me? Not all the time, but if they're not my only source of parenting connection, then I can give them some grace. I have no idea how they were parented or what they're going through in their job, or, you know, whatever else. You know, I could give them grace, I could give myself grace and enjoy them. As we create family bliss, we have the opportunity, or family peace rather, as we create family peace and good feelings, like we have the opportunity to create that in our world. I'd love to hear more about that. You know, I think so many people of all ages, but certainly more conscious women are like, the world is melting. There's strife here and there, and it's true on some level, and we can feel powerless. And I love this idea, and it speaks to our own power, that we can create peace within our family, and that can reverberate out. I'd love to hear more about that from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, yes, I think there is a sense of catastrophe, or a sense of impending doom, a lot of fear around lots of different things that are going on in the world. And that's definitely amplified by the way media works these days, and the way social media works these days, for sure. and we do end up feeling helpless. Like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to fix it? How can I help? And sometimes there are things we can do and sometimes there aren't. But if we look at it from a different angle, the kind of the bad players, the bad actors in the world, I think we could imagine that had they come from a healthy place, it's fair to assume that they would not be taking such a destructive path, right? It's fair to assume they would be equipped with emotional skills and with values and with a belief system that would propel them to do no harm, all right, or at least to try, as we are at least trying. And so in many regards, I think if we had X-ray vision of what's going on in the world, when you see people behaving badly, and this isn't to excuse their behavior, but just to understand it, when you see people behaving badly, I think that it's often rooted in personal trauma, a very personal trauma, like my daddy said this, or my daddy did that, or my mom, did this, or my dad wasn't there, or whatever it was that was in their childhood that was traumatic, is often going to leave such lasting scars that they can't, or they don't, or they won't, or whatever it is, operate well in the world. And I think when you're raising a child, the number one way that you can influence the world, the number one thing that you can possibly do is to try to do no harm and to try to equip this child and orient them in a way to do good in the world, to show up well. To be on balance, more of a positive than a drag, right? Than a negative to the universe on every level. And I think rather than feeling helpless in the face of the big things, we have to realize that the big things are built up of little things, right? Like big bad things that happen in the world. I'm talking about human things, not necessarily natural disasters, but big bad things that happen in the world are often built up of lots of individuals who didn't do the right thing or didn't say no to the wrong thing. And if we could maybe be so bold, have such hubris, be so arrogant as to try and raise an individual who would say no to the wrong thing, right? And who would say yes to the right thing, and who at least would live, with their head on straight, with a backbone. My son's school had a beautiful phrase they used to use, which was tough-minded and warm-hearted.
I love that.
Or a strong backbone and a soft heart, that type of thing. Someone who has a firm, strong backbone, but is warm and kind. If we could be so bold or be so ambitious as to try and raise someone with those skills and without, kind of shielded somewhat from terrible trauma, shielded from the really bad stuff, then listen, that's very far from nothing. That's a big thing. That's a huge contribution, right? That's a huge contribution to the world. And I think that we underplay it. And I also think to be even tougher on this subject is I think it's easy to hide behind lofty goals and ignore the very crucial, very real work that's right in front of us. So I think often when we're mesmerized, like drawn like a moth to a flame by the big things, the shouty headlines and the big problems, it's an easy escape to the very difficult, mundane, day-to-day grind of, go home, get your house in order, get your child, give your child boundaries, stay calm when you want to yell. Those things are really, really hard to show up and do. They're not glamorous. You can't post them on social media. There's no hashtag for them. There's no mantra. There's no rally for it. And so there's no glory in it, and there's no recognition. And you may never get recognized because just doing that emotional labor day to day, hopefully will produce a somewhat stable human being at the end. Right? No one's going to give you a trophy for that. Like there's no.
I wish they would.
Right. If your child ends up in jail, that will make front lines. Then they'll look at your parenting. But like raising a child who avoids ending up in jail, now that's really hard to do. And you're working on that day in, day out. And I think sometimes we're like, well, never mind that my whole entire house is upside down, or that I can't have a normal conversation with my husband about school because we, resort to the most, vile language, or never mind that I'm actually quite violent with my children because I can't control myself because never mind all that stuff I have to work on. What's really important is this big thing over here. And that's a little bit of escapism from the harder work, the less glorified work. And it's also, I think, misguided in the sense that, no, the much more effective, real, long-lasting, intergenerational work that you can do is back at home. So it's not a sexy answer, but that's where I stand on that.
Oh my God, I find it extremely sexy. I'm very turned on. I also think even a step backward would be like creating inner peace, right? Like, I mean, there's just no way for me to recycle if I'm tortured, like if I'm like so busy in anxiety.
Yeah.
Like really on a very practical level, there's just no way for me to be kind if I'm uncomfortable.
That's a fantastic point, is just if you look at efficacy and if you look at the idea of charity beginning at home, or of foundational building blocks, right? How you build a house. It's like, I think going out and trying to change big things is a bit like the roof, right? But you've got to get the foundation in place. And on a practical level, if you have chaos and mayhem and toxicity at home, you're not equipped. You're just not equipped. Like, you're not going out with a full deck of cards to play. You can't really show up. I know that if I've had a fight with my husband, I don't show up well in the world. I'm much edgier, right? I'm not a good person to contribute to a project or to be interviewed on a podcast or whatever, because I'm hurting and I'm seething and I'm ruminating the fight that we had and thinking about my retortions. And I'm over there, right? I'm over there in my own mess. If I could go back and clean that up, maybe now I can come and show up to this next thing. So if you zoom that out on a bigger scale, it's like, look, if your house is really running well and is healthy and everything's okay and you've got everything under control and you feel like you're doing your job as a parent, as a partner, whatever, as an individual, great. Then maybe you're equipped, you can go out, you could, and I think that's why also it takes time in terms of age for people to really make their mark on the world, right? Because it takes us years to kind of establish those foundational layers before we're mature enough, cooked enough, have enough experience to be wise in applying our energy to the next project, right? Like that takes a lot of wisdom. It's not just about shouting something into the ether. It's about being strategic and thinking, well, I have this many years and this much money and this much energy and this much health, and how am I going to spend it on something that will actually help people, that will actually move the needle, that will actually change the world in any kind of small dent way? Right, as college students, we kind of are back there with just like rah rah rah, but as you mature and as you have children, you realize that it's a lot more of a meticulous, detailed, layered process.
I'm so grateful for the impact you make on my own world, just like a personal me. Thank you. And my friends now in present play,
Whenever I need an ego boost, Daniela, I'll know where to come.
Great. I'll send you a Zoom link. It'd be great. Can't wait.
Amazing. I love it.
I wish I could come over and just have a bit of gluten-free pasta, but maybe next time.
Oh,
for real.
Please come over. Someone may have just peed on the floor, but hey.
Oh my God, so exciting. I have like some doggy like spray now, just in case, just like on hand.
I'm not sure this is helping the mom curious folk, right? They're like,
we got to be honest. The other thing about the mom curious folk, they need to know, right? Like, I mean, like people don't ask us because they don't want to be convinced that like our life decision, is like, I find that like my non-mom friends or non-mom yet friends probably wouldn't want to ask me about the nitty-gritty. Yeah, they might want to know the information, but they don't ask because I'd just be validating my own experience. Yeah. It's not for everyone. It's not.
I think we often don't ask because we also don't know where the line is.
Oh.
Like what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what is going to be triggering. So we kind of just hang back. So this is a beautiful place for everyone to be able to hang back and listen to amazing women and mothers and parents talk about their experience in like a free and open way. So on behalf of all the non-moms, we're very grateful for both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. We've covered poop on the floor, world peace. And but is there anything we have missed? What's up next for you, Avital?
I'm sure there are whole libraries we missed. But I think that's fantastic. And just for the record, I am untriggerable, so I would love for you to ask me even anything, 100%. But I'll say something for the mom curious crowd is and about poop on the floor and about all that. Like, I think that's important. I agree with you. You should be honest about it. I recently heard this interesting chapter from a book called The Comfort Crisis, which was excellent, and I recommend it. So he talks about our approach to death in like Western society or weird societies, and he says how we're very, very kind of separated from death today. Like, it used to be that you would see people dying, and when people died, you would be around them and you would be treating the body and you would be taking care of it. And with the development of the industrial era, etc., we became less and less close to that human reality. And we're all gonna die, and everyone we know is gonna die. But even just saying that on a podcast feels like, oh my gosh, you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to own it or face it or be honest about death. It's this taboo subject. It's become taboo. I mean, it really has, to the extent that, like, if someone did have someone who died close to them, then it's, we don't know what to say and we don't know how to handle it, and should we bring it up, and we don't want to cause them pain, etc. And I think that maybe a similar kind of dynamic happens around having children, where we've sterilized it and separated it, right? Especially in America, you really notice that there's a big separation between the have children's and the have not children, right?
Yeah.
Even like restaurants that don't allow children in, or kids menus, or all these separate areas, where other cultures, I think there's a lot more of a mix, especially, I mean, I live in Israel now, there's a lot more of an expectation that children are simply part of the culture. Like, if you're invited to a wedding in Israel, you would just show up with your kids even without asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just part of life. There is no such thing as a restaurant where you cannot bring children, for better or for worse. But I guess my point with all of this is that I think it's become a little bit of a sterilized bubble that's hard to penetrate and access and understand from the outside. And I don't think that's good for us. I don't think that's helping people who are curious about parenting. I don't think it's good for parents. I think it's created a taboo where we're not supposed to be, like you say, we need to be honest about these different experiences. So many things, even about giving birth, that you don't know until you're on the precipice, right? Like, what happens? Are you kidding?
Well, they like, the biggest thing on my way in, they're like, wait, so like, it feels like you have to poop? Like, you're pushing a 6 to 10 pound person out of yourself. Yeah, it feels like you have to poop. I mean, what else are we doing here? But really, it's like such an uncomfortable, like, I mean, really, like, you should see Laura's shoulders are like inside her ear holes. Like, it's so uncomfortable because we haven't, it makes sense, but we haven't let them in. Yeah, it hasn't helped anyone. So I'm hoping that this podcast does help some.
Yes, I think that's amazing. I think it's so important. And I do think that we get a very kind of an image in the media of, like, you see the screaming woman and like, she goes from being all like sexy and preppy and cute to like bags under her eyes and, Cheerios in her hair and toddlers hanging off her legs. And oh my gosh, that's not all there is to parenting at all. I mean, I personally, think that it's a really, really rich human experience. And just like the idea that death needs to be integrated into life, we need to know what that is, right? We're all going towards death. We should be preparing for it. We should be talking about it. We should be living as if we're going to die, because we are. I would say similarly with parenting, it's like, yes, it's an intense all-in experience, but it's a very human experience. It's a reality of how all humans, come into the world. Everyone has a parent or a caregiver, and this bonded, close relationship that has messy sides and has magnificent sides and has, a lot of complexity, but it's a very, very human experience. And I think, I guess the bottom line of the comparison that I made to death was about saying that I don't think we should separate it or look at it with fear, or try to clean it up too much, but rather we should face the reality of it and embrace it as that complex experience. It's not one thing.
Exactly. It's not good and it's not bad. It is. It just is.
It just is very complex. It comes with a lot of every day, every minute, every child, right? It's very evolving, very, very changing, and it changes you. So
even on the fifth time around?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You don't go through a process like pregnancy and birth, for example, without a rebirth yourself, right? It's profound. And I think when people have near-death experiences, or they take on even like massive projects, like running an ultra marathon or something, that changes you, right? Pushing yourself to the edge of any discipline changes you. And bringing a child into the world, or going through adoption or surrogacy, that changes you. It's a very extreme demand on your entire being. So yeah, that's going to change you.
It's like Mount Everest. Yeah.
Mount Everest.
It's Mount Everest. You are a magical human being. And I'm just like so thrilled to have had this hour to talk to you. And also I get to like log on to your seminars and courses and watch your videos all the time. And it's just like, thank you for being you in the world.
Daniela, thank you for being you and all the magic you bring. And thank you so much for having me. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to catch up a little.
Thank you. So where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at theparentingjunkie.com.
Beautiful. Enjoy, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Mom Curious podcast. I've been your host, Daniela Rabbani. Special thanks to executive producer Laura Lucetti. For more episodes, make sure to follow Mom Curious, available on all podcast platforms. Thanks.